Shit We've Read is brought to you by Oblivion Geeks in partnership with Bilo Network.
Please visit shitwe'veread.com to support the show.
Now, let's talk about some books.
Hello and welcome to Shit We've Read, a sci-fi fantasy book podcast. I am your host, Laura Benson, and I'm here with my co-host, Jason Rico.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good.
And then I am really excited to introduce our very first guest host, our amazing friend, EmmaSkies. How's it going?
It's going great. I feel very excited to be your first guest host. I'm just going to forever hold this. Every time that you have anybody on, like if you get really cool authors on this at some point, I'll also be like, but I was the first one.
You will have that title, for sure.
No one can take it from me.
You are the bar that they're all held to.
I'll make sure it's very high.
Well, we're definitely happy to have you. So we know you through some mutual friends before you log off.
Mm-hmm.
So if any of our listeners haven't looked into Before You Log Off yet, they also have a podcast called Bilo Watch, which has Emma on it as one of the hosts. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it really quick?
Yeah, so Bilo Watch, which technically now that we've done two of them is a series, started with a podcast we called Dust Watch. And then we just did another one called Grisha Watch. And essentially, Aaron doesn't read books. And I read a lot of books. So we basically go into a TV show adapted from a book. He goes in completely blind. I don't let him watch the trailers. I don't tell him anything about the book. And then we dissect the TV show from the perspective of somebody who has absolutely no idea what's going on and somebody who has a little bit too much of an idea what's going on. So that's been really fun. We did the first one with His Dark Materials on HBO, which is the His Dark Materials books, the Golden Compass books. And then recently we did Shadow and Bone on Netflix. So that's been a lot of fun. And then we have another one coming up in June that I don't think we've announced yet. Hey. So keep an eye out for that.
So shortly after this releases. So that'll be cool. Good
timing.
timing.
Oh my God, it's almost June.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Well, we're excited to have you on. We are going to talk about the book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Before we get into all the nitty gritty of that, I first wanted to ask both of you guys, what is some of the shit you have read or are currently reading?
Emma, you can go first.
Oh, okay. So these days, I don't generally read more than one book at a time. I kind of try to keep it one at a time, but I did break my rule for this. I paused my current book to read our current The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. But I've been reading Gideon the Ninth for a book club that I host. I'm finally getting to a point in it where I'm really enjoying it, but it is a little bit hard to get into. And then what did I just read? As soon as I read something and I start something else, it is gone from my mind. I know I just read Shadow and Bone for that podcast, and then it's going to bother me. As soon as I stop talking, I'll be like, oh, that's what the book I read was. But anyway, Gideon the Ninth is the short answer.
Okay. That's on my list still. I do plan to hopefully get to it soon. What about you, Jason?
Before we jump to what I'm reading, I have read Gideon the Ninth. I have opinions about it, so I'd be very curious to hear what you think of it once you're finished. But anyhow. The last thing I read was Spells Trouble by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. It's not out yet. I think it releases next month. Could be wrong about that. I read an arc for it. It's the first book in a series called Sisters of Salem, Two Twin Witches. I don't know how to say without giving too much away. Anyhow,
Spoilers.
It's young adult fantasy magic. Reminded me a lot of Practical Magic meets Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
Oh, interesting.
That's a ship I somehow always made. I never got into Percy Jackson and Olympians, and I'm at the point in my life where I feel like it's too late. I feel like I've missed the boat and I can't do it anymore.
Look, they're making a TV adaptation of it. So I think that is your way on the boat.
Hey.
That's fair. No, that's a very fair point. And then I can segue that into another Bilo Watch
Exactly.
series. Oh,
Exactly.
okay. Here we go. Nope, that's it. I'm back on the boat.
We look forward to hearing that podcast then.
So that's the last thing I've read, and the next thing I'm going to read, as soon as we're done with this episode, is the ones we're meant to find by Joan He, I believe. Young adult sci-fi.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, just released earlier this month. Very, very pretty book. I got my Owl Crate edition. I think Emma, you did too.
You also
jealous.
have Owl
Yeah.
Crate? I'm obsessed with Owl
I
Crate.
got it too.
Oh my god.
So yeah, that's gonna be the next book I'm gonna read. I'm very excited about that. I heard a lot of good things about it, so excited to dive into that.
Nice. I just read Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley a couple of weeks ago. It's not something that I generally read. It's like a mystery, kind of, mystery. But it was interesting because it follows a biracial. It says a biracial unenrolled tribal member. So she's an 18-year-old girl who's Native American but not enrolled, and so it's kind of following her it's following her story through a murder mystery, basically, and just kind of what she deals with being a Native American, which is supposed to be very much based on real life. So there's some very heartbreaking things that she experiences, but it was very eye-opening. So I definitely recommend that book to anyone interested in it, Firekeeper's Daughter. So, but I am excited to probably jump into Addie LaRue next.
Oh my god! You have to give me like play-by-plays for listeners. I am obsessed with this book. Addie LaRue was the first book I read this year in January. There has not been a single day that has gone by that I have not thought about this book. So if you're reading it, I need to know everything.
I will keep you updated for sure.
That you guys can't hear it if you can't see it if you're listening, but Jason and Laura, you can both see that shelf right there. All 5 of those are Addie LaRue.
You do have a lot of editions. I feel like that's probably going to end up being me with the ones we're meant to find.
Oh yes.
I have Jason on the lookout to see if I can buy an Owl Crate edition. And then I just bought the Barnes & Noble edition, and I still might buy the regular edition because I like the blue hardcover.
Me too. I thought the Barnes & Noble edition was the regular one, and then I saw somebody post their blue hardcover, and I was like, where do I find that? And I guess it's literally anywhere else.
Yep. That is correct. But you have a very beautiful Addie LaRue shelf.
It's very pretty.
Let's jump into our book.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Yeah. So again, the title of this month's book is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which was actually a Kickstarter-funded book by Becky Chambers. It was released in 2014. It is the first book out of 4, and it looks like a novella. So we're only reading the first one for the podcast. This is a science fiction space opera and very much LGBTQ as well. The series is also a Hugo Award winner, so that's kind of cool. For anyone who doesn't know much about this book, I'm going to read the synopsis from Goodreads. It says, follow a motley crew on an exciting journey through space and one adventurous young explorer who discovers the meaning of family in the far reaches of the universe. In this lighthearted debut space opera from a rising sci-fi star, Rosemary Harper doesn't expect much when she joins the crew of the aging Wayfarer, an introspective young woman who learned early to keep to herself. She's never met anyone remotely like the ship's diverse crew, including Sissix, the exotic reptilian pilot, chatty engineers Kizzy and Jenks, who keep the ship running, and Ashby, their noble captain. Life aboard the Wayfarer is chaotic and crazy, exactly what Rosemary wants. It's also about to get extremely dangerous when the crew is offered the job of a lifetime. But risking her life wasn't part of the plan. To survive, Rosemary's got to learn how to rely on this assortment of oddballs. an experience that teaches her about love and trust, and that having a family isn't necessarily the worst thing in the universe.
Oh.
Aw. Let's do some non-spoiler stuff. For anyone who hasn't read it and wants to read it, we don't want to spoil a lot of details. I want to know, let's start with Jason this time. What were your thoughts on this book?
I liked it overall. It wasn't as action heavy as maybe I thought it would be. It was very much about characters and relationships, which for some reason I feel it's kind of rare in sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of sci-fi, especially space sci-fi, is very much about the science. And at least for me, I read a lot of hard sci-fi, which is all about the science and the math behind things, and it's more about that than it is the people. So I really like the fact that it was about people and what makes these people tick, how they get along with each other. I love the fact that there were alien species. Like, that is by far like my favorite kind of space sci-fi. Like, if you're gonna be in space, give me some aliens. The one note I put in the book, like, overall, was like, this is the future liberals want. And then
Yeah.
we could touch upon that a little bit as we go.
Yeah.
But like, I was just reading things, I'm like, God, there's a lot going on in here that I personally like. But
I'm absolutely here for that.
That's a good point. I did not think about it, but that's very true. I could see the way that it would work that way.
yeah, so overall, I liked it.
Cool. Okay. What about you, Emma? I know that you are not generally a sci-fi reader, so this was a little different for you.
It was. We've talked about this before, that like I want to get into reading more sci-fi. I have a handful on my shelf, but like I am massively dominated by fantasy. I think this is a really good entry point for anybody wanting to get into sci-fi, specifically for like what Jason said. Like, it's very character driven. It's super character driven, where like it's almost like the sci-fi aspect, or like the space technical aspect, is almost the backdrop to the main story, and the main story is the characters, which can be a good or a bad thing. In this case, I think it worked really well because all the characters are really good. Like, they're like, I actually cared a lot about them. You guys both know this, but I read 60% of the book today. And it makes for like a really compelling read. Like, there was no point where I felt bored. Like, I literally sat in one spot for 5 hours and read the second half of this book, and it just keeps you going. Like, there's no point where it felt too slow, or it felt too technical, or it felt too bogged down by anything. But at the same time, like, I didn't feel like I was missing out on a whole lot, like only having the characters there. I think it worked really, really well.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it then. I was worried.
I like sci-fi, and like I love sci-fi in movies and TV shows. I just have never gotten too much into it in books. So I'm really like, it's part of what I have been wanting to branch out of. It's like, oh yeah, they write books that aren't just like magic and elves and shit. I should probably see what that's all about.
I will totally admit, I told Laura, we need to make Emma read a sci-fi book because we need to bring out of her element. Like, whether she loves it or hates it, I think it's gonna be a good conversation. But we need to make her read a sci-fi book.
To my own credit, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars was like one of my favorite books that I read last year. Although also a good entry level for me because it's by a fantasy author, but it counts.
True.
It counts, technically.
That's very true. Well, I am pretty much in the same line as you guys. I really liked it overall. There was a lot of positive things happening in it, and at the same time a lot of not very positive things, but they made you think and draw parallels to things in our own world. So I thought it was a really good book overall. And it was different for me too, in that it was so very character driven. I'm not used to that in sci-fi at all. I'm used to way more, crazy action and space fights and
Pew, pew.
stuff like that. So so it was different, but I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it for sure. Okay, well, there's a lot of detailed stuff to get into, so we're gonna jump into spoilers. So if anybody is planning to read it and doesn't want any details log off now and then come back once you've read it to join the conversation. All right, so spoilers starting now. I actually wanted to start this off really quick with a really quick little question. Are you team mech, happy tea, or boring tea?
Where's Team Water? Where's that team? I don't drink tea or alcohol, so I'm screwed. Like, I drink alcohol, but like I don't seek it out. They drink water too. That's a thing. Does that make me boring tea? I'm on
mech
boring tea.
is their equivalent of coffee, right?
I think so.
They kept talking about how it makes them fuzzy, though. They were like, you only get 1 cup because you're not coming back if you're fuzzy-headed. So I assumed it was alcoholic.
I thought it was just the caffeine content. Like, you can't have more than a couple cups of coffee in a day or else you just get really wired.
Because it makes you jitty.
Yeah.
Isn't that
jittery.
the happy tea, though?
No, happy tea was just caffeinated
And then
tea.
when they do actually have regular coffee at one point. So it's different.
I noticed that. That's why I was really
what
confused.
The heck? Then I don't know what anything
was.
is anymore.
I think
it's
mech is
alcohol.
supposed to be coffee.
Mech's like a Four Loko, right? You
Right,
get the
it's
caffeine
both.
and the alcohol.
There we go.
You have one and you're
It's your
done,
coffee with
Joe.
Bailey's.
Well, which one are you, Jason?
Man, if mech is the alcohol, then I might change my mind. No, I'm happy tea. I am by far a tea drinker. I like herbal teas, but Earl Grey is like my go-to kind of tea. Good caffeinated tea makes me happy. Therefore, I am happy tea.
Wow. So poetic.
How about you?
Actually, huh?
How about you? Where are you at?
Oh, you know what? For a while, I was going back and forth between the happy tea and boring tea because I really like some of the herbal flavors, but I'm most likely going to pick something that's caffeinated, so I'd say happy tea.
They also had fizz at one point, which I'm assuming is like their version of soda.
Yes, that's kind of what I got.
In which case, I'm in that camp. As I sit here with my bottle of soda that I keep drinking from, hoping my mic isn't picking up.
You're fine. Well, none of us picked mech then, so my next question doesn't really
Well, hold on.
apply.
Before you jump to that, I will say my answer might be slightly biased, only because I've recently been going through some of the Star Wars Extended Universe books, and in the last 2 series, they've been mentioning calf a lot, which is their version of coffee. Calf, like caffeine. It's just called calf. Can you get you a cup of calf?
Okay.
But they mention it like 20 times a book. And it's like, do you have nothing else to drink in this universe? And so like the mention of calf drives me crazy. And so when I saw mech, I was like, oh, this is just calf again. So
they do talk about it quite a
Yeah.
lot. It does come up a lot.
It
You're
really
just triggered
does.
by coffee now.
yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Look, everybody
Okay.
in that universe is real tired, okay? There's
Yeah,
a lot of shit going on.
They do have
So
different
you-
time. Like they have like 10 days and their days are not 24 hours. Are they longer, I think?
Yeah, it was something like standard days and then Earth days or something like that.
I was hoping that
Soul.
they would eventually go into like a little bit of how that split up because they kept talking about people had to convert standard time to like galactic commons time, which
you're
makes
right.
sense that like if you're in that federation, there is one standardized time period, even though you're all on different planets that have like different orbital patterns and thus your years and days are different. But like it never really talked about the difference. Like I couldn't tell which one's longer, which one's shorter. They would have to keep converting into like standard years, like ages and things. But yeah, and then 10 days, which was another one that like I think that's kind of what clued me into the fact that whatever she was doing with info dumping or world building was going really well because she never had to explain what a 10-day was, but we all caught on to the fact that like that's a week. Like that's their version of like a week.
I think the only reference that really kind of gave a little bit more hint to how the timing worked was almost halfway into the book when they were visiting Kizzy's friends. One of them said something like, I bought this place about 5 years back. That's what, about 3 standards or something.
Oh,
Never
did
can
they?
remember GC time.
Fair.
But I don't know how years work on that planet either. So I just tried to keep that in the back of my mind as I continued reading. But I was like, dang, 5
And then I feel
years
very
is 3
ethnocentric.
standards?
Yeah, I felt like very ethnocentric because like every time they would talk about standard, I would assume Earth. I was like, oh, standard Earth because I'm an Earth person reading this. But then I think about the fact that like they don't give a shit about humans or people from Earth. Like we were not there at the beginning, so it's obviously not us. And then I was just lost again. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna not worry about time periods here.
It got a little weird, but you figure it out as you go. Well, so you mentioned the world building. This book has a lot of world building as in like universe building. Do you think that she wrote this well? Was it the right amount? Was it too much?
Yeah, I think the author did a really good job of giving us a lot of terms and a lot of clues as to how the universe works and what's included in this universe without having to spell it out for us. Like the one term that comes to mind was grounders, which I believe meant people who lived on the planet as opposed to the humans that lived and were born in space or outside of Earth.
Yeah, like grounders versus spacers.
Yeah, so that was just a term, and she never really explained what it meant, but you kind of pick up the fact that this world has all these terms. It has its own ways of measuring time and days and weeks, and really kind of laying on all these nuggets that really make the universe feel thought out, which for me, reading a fantasy or a sci-fi is always one of the things I look at. It's like, does this universe feel like the author really thought it out? Or is this kind of lazy? And I feel like the author put a lot of thought into building the different species and the way these species work, like the sociology of them, familial units, relationships between different species, all that kind of stuff. I just felt like it was really good.
Yeah, I feel like the interspecies relationships were like really where this shined because it was more than just, oh, this race doesn't like this race or this race gets along with this race. Like she had the sociological implications built into each race as to why that would not make them mesh well with another society or why it would make them mesh really well. Like she went really hard and heavy into how they all worked and how they worked together and where they didn't work together and like things that they had to overcome in that way. And like that makes it sound like the whole thing is super like politics heavy, and it's still really not. Like it still just feels like you're reading about individual people and their cultures without reading too much into like the political ramifications of everything. Even though that's very much there, it doesn't necessarily feel like that the whole time.
Yeah, I thought that it's funny because it's like Chambers like peppered in exposition through the entire book, but you didn't always realize that you were reading it because it was so well hidden in dialogue and the different perspectives. And it was just so easy to pick up on these different things as we were reading and learning through. And it didn't feel like it was heavy in one place. It was just nicely spread out, and you only learned it when you needed to learn it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys also mentioned the different species and cultures. I think I agree in that was one of the things that really stood out the most to me was these very diverse characters, and how all the genders were represented, sexual orientations, relationships. There was so much in here that she really wrote quite well. Did either of you have any particular favorite out of all of those? Any favorite culture or character?
I love the Andrisks.
Same.
They were by far my favorite culture. Like I could personally do without the like public open sex all the time. Like I could maybe do without that part of it. But I think what really clicked it for me is when she started talking about their familial units, like the difference between Hatch family, Feather family, and Egg family. I want to say. I feel like I'm messing up the third one. Hatch
House
family,
family.
Feather, House family. Thank you.
House
Family was the third one. It was funny because like as I was reading, I was just like, as somebody who doesn't want and or particularly like children, this speaks to me. I was like, and they were easily my favorite. Sissix was probably my favorite of the crew members, but like she went really, really like there was a lot of thought into how their culture works, and that stood out a lot.
Yeah. What I loved about the Andress is Chambers was explaining this culture and how they have these different types of families, and it seems kind of alien if you think about it, but also it's very much the way humans function anyway. Like you have the family you're born into, and sometimes you like that family, sometimes you don't, sometimes it's complicated, and then eventually when you get older, you make your own family, friends, loved ones, your partners, you that found family, and then eventually when you get to a point in your life where you're ready to build a family, you decide whether or not you want to have kids or it's just your partner and you want to travel the world, whatever, that's your house family. So it's these things that humans do naturally that she was applying to this alien species, which I really, really liked. It made a lot of sense. The fact that you can like have a kid, but you're not at that point of your life where you're ready to have kids. And so it's like, well, why should I have to raise this kid? This child should go to people who are wiser and old enough in that point in their life where they can raise a kid. Like that made so much sense. And I just feel like, honestly, humanity might be in a better place if we adapted some of these things. Emma, like you said, the public sex things, a little more complicated, a little more weird, but
not really for everyone.
That's just our own personal biases as humans. So you do you.
What about you, Laura? Where was your favorite species?
Honestly, I think I'm gonna say the same thing. It was just fascinating the relationships and how they changed so easily and how it was just accepted. When you moved on to the next family, it was just normal. And then how Sissix, I can't even say her name, Sissix, you discover that her Feather family is the crew, which was just like, it was so heartwarming and amazing. I was like, oh, she made her family officially not part of her species. That's amazing. That is a perfect example of I make my own family. And I think we can probably all connect to that in some way of some point in our life where we had to decide, who was going to be close to us that way. So I think I really enjoyed learning about their culture. And I loved that we actually got to go to their planet and see how they interact with each other, instead of just having them talk about it. So
I think that makes sense. Is like why we all kind of latched onto them as the best species in the book too, because like she clearly spent the most time on them, and like being able to go to their home world, like that makes sense that we all kind of latched onto them as the best one. But that was probably, speaking of Feather families, like one of the only things that I really wanted out of the book that I didn't get was I really wanted to see her present a feather to Rosemary at some point. Like as soon as they brought up, like Rosemary asked what was going on, and like, Kizzy explains, and she's like, oh yeah, we all kind of have one from her at this point. Like after they were boarded by pirates and like Rosemary talked that shit down, I was like, oh, she's for sure gonna get a feather. No, did not get one. Where's my feather?
That's a good point. There's more books after this.
That's fair. If Rosemary does not get a feather in the next 3.5 books, so help me. We'll write a strongly worded letter.
I thought it was interesting too specifically like with their relationship. We'll just put it out there. Sissix and Rosemary. Well, it connects. They're in some kind of relationship arrangement. But when they're talking about it before they make this decision, Sissix had said something to the effect of like, if I decide that I want to be with someone else or I need to be with someone else or something, like, you have to be okay with that. And she's like, yeah, I'm fine with that. And I thought that was kind of interesting too, because it plays into the like the open relationships or even polyamorous in terms of like how their culture is, accepting that sometimes people want to be with other people for whatever reason. And I think they also talk about that, like when they're talking about Corbin and Ashby. She's like, I don't like Corbin, but I understand Ashby needs him,
Right.
so I accept it. So I thought that was kind of cool that we went into that a little bit about just relationships, whether it's being together or just being around the same people. It's figuring out how to make these different relationships work, even if you don't exactly mesh.
Yeah, I really like that because most people have family members that you don't get along with the best, but you understand that they're part of your family, or if they're married to somebody in your family, they're important to them, and so they're part of your family whether you want it or not. So I like the fact that Sis6 had that like knowledge of like, look, I don't like this guy, I could lose him in a heartbeat, but he's part of the family, like it or not, so I'm gonna do what I gotta do for him.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is very much how the reader ends up feeling about Corbin too. And one of the things that I was thinking about when like we keep talking about how this is like such a character driven story, it's all about the characters, you have all these different perspectives, and whether that can work or not work. And I realized one of the reasons it works so well is I think she structures it in a way that you're always reading about somebody that you care about and somebody that like you want to know. Like there's no point where like I was reading about somebody for so long and I was like, just move on, or like I wanted to get to a certain character and it wasn't getting to them, which I think happened a lot. For me, and like in Game of Thrones, it happened a lot, where like he would just avoid a character for so long, and I'm like, I only want to know what this one is. But she always seemed to have the character that you wanted to be reading about, that always made sense in the timeline, and she almost never focused on Corbin, who was like the only one that I think we would have been like, okay, I don't want to read about this guy anymore. But there's only like there's like 2 or 3 prominent Corbin sections, and they all make sense. And other than that, she leaves him the fuck alone.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, we definitely focus on more of the characters, more of the other characters than on Corbin. But what we did get made sense to the story, to who he is, and to his relationship with everyone else.
I was so ready to love Corbin. Like I really wanted to love Corbin more than I did, because when they first introduced him, like this, it says Corbin hated people, but he loved his work and he was damn good at it. And right away is like, okay, this is like the human suck, leave me to my science trope. There's so many characters like, I don't like humanity, I don't relate to them, I'm going to study my plants, I'm going to study my technology. And a lot of times these characters are some of the best, because you, on some level, you kind of relate to them, because like, yeah, people suck sometimes. So I wanted to see more of Corbin, honestly, but also the way Chambers wrote him was like, yeah, he's kind of a dick though. Like not like a good redeemable kind of dick, just he's just kind of a jerk. So
like just an asshole for the sake of being an asshole.
Yeah.
So I think we can say right off the top there that we see Firefly in this very much, right? The TV show Firefly.
I've never seen Firefly.
Oh my gosh, Emma. What? Oh my gosh, Jason, you are both. I am disowning you right now.
I watched Serenity, the movie. Does that count?
That's close. Yeah, that's fine. But you.
I know
so then, if you've
crew.
seen,
I know.
If you've seen the movie, so their characters and the relationships and stuff that they have, I feel like Becky Chambers probably got a lot of inspiration from Firefly for this. So when I started reading it, when I got to Corbin, I immediately connected him to Jane Cobb. They're not the same character, only in that they are only the same character in that they are both assholes. But I kept seeing this like angry, confrontational person every time Corbin was in the scene.
Every crew needs an asshole.
Because I always
smile and nod like I know who that is.
Yep, totally. Jane Cobb, absolutely, 100%.
He's the weapons expert in Firefly.
Every crew needs an asshole. Like if you break down any
that's true
group in sci-fi, there's always that one guy who's kind of an asshole.
Wait a minute. If we're talking though about what we see each character as, have you guys seen Titan AE?
Yes.
Okay, so in my whatever, Ohan is Gru.
Okay.
And Sissix is the kangaroo looking alien that I cannot remember the name of. But I don't know what it was, because Sissix is not described as a kangaroo looking person. But for whatever reason, I was just like, that's who this is. That's who this is.
I was thinking that too. I was. Jason.
I think I've seen it many, many years ago, but I don't remember anything about it. So just
wow.
leave me out of this.
Wow.
I am 0 for 2 in this conversation. So
that's a good movie.
Next
I'll
one,
just
guys.
say that.
I'll know the next one.
So we're talking about the characters already. So what was your thought on the motley crew is what the author called it? Like the crew itself, did you like the characters? Did you have a favorite? I think Emma, I think you said who was your favorite just a minute ago.
I love Sissix. Sissix might be my favorite. It's either Sissix or Kizzy is my favorite.
Okay. They're
very much tied. They all mesh really well together. They all have really distinct personalities. They're all written very well from their own perspectives. And just, I feel like I need to say Jenks just because we have not mentioned Jenks once at this point, and I feel like he needs to be mentioned. And Lovey. They all work so well. I love a good ship AI. So I was immediately, as soon as they introduced Lovey, I was like, I'm gonna like you. I am going to Lovey. It's gonna be great. But yeah, I think probably Sissix or Kizzy would be my favorites. Although Rosemary, very much. Am I just gonna name all the women?
What else? Ashby, you left out Ashby.
I do love Ashby. I do.
The one you left off that I really like was Dr. Chef. I love Dr. Chef.
Yeah, Dr. Chef. We haven't mentioned him at all.
I think he's my second favorite character. I love just how every crew needs that wise person you go to, right? Like that bartender person you can just go and talk to, and that's Dr. Chef. And I loved how excited he got with Rosemary's name. He's like, oh, what does your name mean? Oh, it's an herb. Oh, herbs. I just learned about herbs and all this stuff. I was like, oh my God, Dr. Chef, I fucking love you.
I feel like he's a great mix because the trope is always that the person that's going to be your go-to emotional support is always either going to be the bartender, the cook, or the doctor. And she was like, but what if he was both?
Yeah.
And then we named him Dr. Chef. Boom.
I loved that.
Sold.
And she wrote it so well.
It made sense why
at
that
first
name
I was
that
doesn't make sense. Why is he both? But then the more you got to know him, it's like, oh, that makes sense why he can do both. That's okay. I like this.
Oh, and then you get his backstory. Yeah. I did not expect that man to make me cry. I was sitting in my backyard just crying on my security cameras. My God.
And what I loved about his species, the Grum, is I think he said that everybody starts off female, and then when you get old enough, they become male. And I love that. I think I think humanity would be so much better off if we all started female and then became male later on. Because
I don't disagree.
Because I think you'd just lose a lot of the asshole guys. Because you would understand what it was like to be a woman at some point. And so in theory, you would stop being an asshole.
I guess, do you think that in a society where everyone starts on one end of the gender, at this point, they clearly have some sort of gender binary. So where everybody starts on one end of a gender binary and then moves naturally to the other, do you think that negates any possibility of sexism in a culture? Or does it just become ageism?
Ooh.
Does sexism still exist in a culture like that? And then do you have people that try to fight the change? Why am I thinking about this now? Where am I going with this?
No, that's a very good question, Emma.
I would say realistically there would still be some sexism, but it might come more from I know what it was like to be a woman. I was dumb, or I was this, or I blah 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 blah. And so you would project that onto other people who are now that gender when maybe it isn't warranted. Does that make sense? You're just
projecting their own experience as that gender.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes more of an age thing at that point of
I guess in that way, it probably would technically be an ageism thing.
Can you imagine like the most like gruff, terrible old dude politician just standing at a podium like, when I was a young woman back in my day? Oh man, that'd be wild.
Well, we pretty much listed like almost every character that we liked, but the
Except
different,
for
except for Ohan.
Mm-hmm.
Ohan was very interesting.
Yeah.
I have a hard time picturing what they look like.
I'm just going with Gru. So I don't know. I think Laura might know this. I don't know if Jason knows. So I have aphantasia, which I don't know if I've mentioned before. I have no visual imagination.
That's right.
So I can't like, which is why like I connect it to characters I've already seen. I'm like, okay, he's Gru because I've seen that. I know what that looks like. Or like she's the kangaroo. Like I've seen that. I know what that looks like because I can't imagine what they look like. So I'm just like, whatever's on the page, I'm like, yeah, no, that's about right. That's it. That works.
Okay, that makes it a little harder. I just remember Ohan is supposed to be walking on all fours, and they have blue fur that they shave designs and symbols or something into it. But that's all that I really remember.
That's about right.
It sounds fascinating.
Is there fan art for this? We should have looked up fan art.
I've saved some, but I don't remember what any of the artists made them look like.
That's fair.
Though I don't know. Technically, Ohan now is he, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's a good question. We'll have to look into that. I wanted to ask you guys. Obviously, we like all of the crew at this point. But did you have a particular character that you actually connected with on your own? Like just as you, who did you connect with the most?
I have the most boring answer. It's Rosemary. The like small human, she's like the one that's just most like us. She's the human that has no idea where her place is in this like crew full of aliens and this big giant universe around her, and like just wants to get away from home and leave and just be anywhere else but Mars. I was like, no, that's about right. That's about right.
I mean, she's a surrogate. She's the audience surrogate, right? So it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. There's parts of myself that I see in different members of the crew. I will say Corbin's one of them because I tend to get really annoyed at stupid little shit, and I know I get annoyed at stupid little things. Doesn't stop me from getting annoyed though. And so when he getting upset of like, Rosemary, you bought the wrong adapter thing or whatever, it's like it wasn't a big deal, but it's annoying sometimes. So I got it. I like Jenks. I don't know if I necessarily relate to him, but there was something about him connecting with the artificial intelligence that I kind of liked. It was like, I don't know, it was like kind of like the other side of the coin of Corbin, where Corbin thinks all humanity sucks. I just want to work on my plans. Jenks to me was kind of like, well, not that all humanity sucks, but there's a perfection that I haven't found yet in humanity. I can only find it in this artificial person. And there's something...
You're so poetic tonight, Jason.
It's the drinks. It's the tiki drinks.
It's your 1 out of 10 tipsy level.
Yeah, so I don't know. I thought that was kind of beautiful. And the fact that he treated Lovey as an actual person. It wasn't just like, oh, I love this idea of a person. No, like he really felt that Lovey was a person. And when it came to that conversation of, hey, do we want to get you a body kit? And Lovey is like, well, I only want to do this for you. And Jenks is like, well, it's a lot of risk. Is it worth it? I the fact that they disliked each other the way they are now, and it's content the way they are now, that was really pretty. And yeah, I'm getting emotional.
Have either of you guys read the Lunar Chronicles?
Emma.
Emma.
Wow.
Is that a
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
Yes.
That's a yes.
Because I got big Aiko vibes from Lovey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, you're
Yeah.
right.
Especially when they started talking about getting her a body kit, and like all I could remember was how excited Aiko was for a body, and like how she wanted the perfect body, and she was so like she just wanted to be like a hot human woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I was like, if Aiko was a little more chill, this might be her.
Emma, I saw you reading those books and I was like, welcome to the club. You finally got here.
They were so
They were
good. I
so
did
good.
not expect them to be
They
so
were so
good.
good, yeah.
Oh,
That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
series.
oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So good. Well, Emma, I don't think you saying you're connecting to Rosemary. I don't think that's boring. Honestly, I connect to Rosemary probably first because the way she is very much reminds me like she's kind of in a way very naive because she was so sheltered on Mars. And I come from a very sheltered religious family. So there were parts of her story where I was like, oh, I know how that feels to learn this or to see this for the first time because I've been through something similar. Jason, like you, I also kind of connected with Corbin sometimes because I too can get very annoyed at certain things. But you know what? It's kind of weird too, related to the religious thing. I want to say I probably connected a little bit to Ohan also. Not necessarily religion, but kind of a religion in what he's going through or was going through. Believing in something and then kind of questioning. I think a lot of people go through that. So I kind of wish we had more of Ohan in this book.
Yeah, same.
I wanted to learn more about him and more about the I don't know how to say it, cyanate pair. That just sounded really fascinating, and I was hoping to learn a little bit more. Some, I don't know, maybe there's more in the other books, but he was very interesting to me.
I was very disappointed that we didn't get more of Ohan's story. Because the other characters, like you understand, like in the future there might be more to Rosemary, more to Dr. Chef or whatever. But Ohan now is a totally different character. So you can't get more of who Ohan used to be.
Yeah, it'll all be like flashbacks of how he used to think.
Yeah, so I wanted
if we get anything back.
I wanted some more of the they and what it was like to be them
and like that could have been more helpful as well. Like if we had more of a look at how Ohan operated as a cyanate pair, and if there was more of a look at how the Whisperer affected his thought patterns, that may have helped toward the end when things get going, and like the way that you think of what happens to him at the end of the book, and does that change? Or I don't know. There's things that I think that could have been done there now that you mentioned that. I don't know why I'm talking vaguely when we're going to do spoilers. When he gets the cure and you're like, okay, well, this could be good or bad. But like if you have, like if you knew how much the Whisperer, like if there was some sort of inclination that the Whisperer was changing his thought patterns or forcing him to do or think certain things, then you could accept that ending more easily in the end, if you had any difficulty with it to begin with.
That could have been the author's intent, is leaving you really kind of struggling, like, is this a good decision or not?
Well, let's get into this question then about what happened. So Corbin forces this cure to get rid of the Whisperer, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah, that virus that they inject themselves with.
So, you know, what was that right? Was that wrong? How did you guys feel reading that?
Does anybody have like a really strong opinion? I have a very strong opinion about this.
I tend to play like devil's advocates on both sides. I see both sides of the argument. I think respecting Ohan's wishes, you should not have. Like whether you agree or not, they did not want this. You're fundamentally changing who they are. So they shouldn't have done it. On the flip side, I understand the selfish desire to like, yo, you're going to die. I can save you. Yes, you don't want this, but you're going to live. and you are not in the right headspace to make the decision, so I'm going to make it for you. So I get that argument too. Like we were saying, if we had got a little more of that backstory of what it was like to be a cyanide parent, maybe I'd have stronger feelings.
Emma, I'm just going to let you go.
I feel so strongly that this was wildly fucked up. That was so messed. I was like, and like, this was so wrong on every level. Like, to make somebody's end of life choices, not just to, because like there's a question of like making somebody's end of life choices when you're not sure, but when you know for a fact they've basically written their own DNR and you're going to go against their medical wishes.
Yeah.
And then not only to go against their medical wishes, but to go against their religious code. Like, I'm not a religious person. I'm just not. But like, I'm not going to go against somebody's religious choices when it comes to their death. That's so fucked. And I think if it had, what I had kind of imagined as things were going down in the end, so they get sucked into basically the tunnel that's not complete, and they have to outrun it, and he starts fading. And I was like, okay, I can see where this is going to go. They're going to get to a point where they need him, and he's dying while they actively need him to navigate them out, or they're all going to die, and that's how they're going to use the cure, and they're going to get him to live. Like, okay, whatever. But that's how it happened, because he lives through that, and then Corbin does it anyway when they no longer have an active need for him. That was so messed up. I was furious. Like, I'm glad Ohan lives. That's super great. Clearly it turned out all right. He seems to be okay with it. Like, I guess he's been forgiven. I really hope that this is like a big plot point in the next book or two, and we actually like dive deep into how messed up that was. But he was straight up like, they're not going to fire me because that would mean you have to fire Sissik, so I can do whatever I want. Like, fuck your wishes. You're not going to die. That's so messed up. I was mad. I was so mad.
I think when I was reading it, I think, it implied he had something in his hand, Corbin. And I was like, oh no, is that the cure? Oh, yeah. I don't know. And then it happened, and I think I actually gasped out loud. And then I was very kind of very torn in that I understand both perspectives too, like Jason. But then I was also thinking in terms of like, this, I'm not saying it's a cult type thing, but it also kind of felt like, oh, you're told this is how it works. So you get it, you live, and then you die from it. So then I was like, well, maybe this thing does change how he thinks. He's been brainwashed maybe since he was a child. Maybe he does need this cure. But then I was like, but I don't know enough about it to know that. So I was like angry, probably just as angry as you, but at the same time, my other thought process was we just don't know enough of what's going on to feel like this is okay or not.
Let me ask you this. The fact that Corbin did it, does that make it any more understandable, knowing that we've already established that Corbin's an ass? Like, if anybody else had done it, would it be more upsetting? Would it be less upsetting?
I think it would have been more understandable if it was anybody else, because anybody else would have been doing it for themselves. Like, Sissik would have been doing it for herself because she didn't want him to die because she's his friend. Or Ashby would have done it for himself. But like, Corbin's just doing it because he thinks it's what everybody else wants. And like, regardless of whether that's true or not, like, he was just like, they're all sad and I don't want them to be more sad. So
he thinks that he thinks he's helping out the crew and
I feel like it's like a big emotional moment for him. Yeah. Like, it's the first time that you see him like view himself as part of the crew, and it's like he's kind of taking it upon himself to do this thing that nobody else will do. And I feel like that's supposed to be a big moment for him. It's character
growth.
It is for him, but it fucks over another character.
It's character growth.
Character growth and somehow almost more of an asshole. Oh my god.
He was very much an asshole about it. He's the only one that made sense. It only made sense for him to do it. He could get
especially after like Ashby had that conversation with Sissik where he's talking about like cultural differences and how like she's not willing to accept that this is a cultural difference the same as anything else. Like, I thought that was a really good conversation. I was like, this is, and like, it's going to be such a powerful moment for all of them when they have to like, you know, watch while he dies and like stand around and have a funeral for him. And I don't know. And then I kind of, once they introduced the cure, and then especially once they brought it on board, I was like, okay, so he's not going to die. Like, clearly somebody's going to use something, whether he decides to or not. But just the way, like, if they had done it just when he was dying during the navigation, I totally could have got that. Like, I would have been okay, would have been fine. But like, you had an imminent need where all of you were going to die if one of you died. So that makes sense. But they waited until after the action and gave me a moral dilemma.
Well, I think it brings up, you know, it brings up a lot of things for us to think about, you know, in comparison to what happens in the real world. Like you had brought up, respecting religious views and respecting what people want to happen in general when they die, or, you know, the do not resuscitate and things like that. It's there. Obviously there are some gray areas, but it's still a very important topic to talk about that very much applies to us.
Well, like there are religions where this might be wrong, and I deeply apologize if it is, but I think Jehovah's Witnesses can't have blood transfusions, right? Like that's correct. Part of their deeply held religious beliefs. And even when it's something where like something as simple as a blood transfusion could save your life, your doctor can't do it if it's against your deeply held religious beliefs.
You are
so
correct.
Why did we cure Ohan? Oh, he's an adult making his own their own decisions. My God.
Yeah.
Although, I'm really curious to see how Ohan continues, and I'm really hoping that it's something that's actively grappled with in the next book, and that it doesn't just kind of move on to like, oh, Ohan's a singular now, Ohan's a solitary, and this is just his story now. Like, I hope there's some sort of fallout from that decision, because by the end of this book, there really wasn't. It was just that, like, some time has passed. Ohan has clearly forgiven him. Ashby was really the only one that was still kind of holding on to that grudge. And then he even says, like, you know, I guess if Ohan can forgive you, I can forgive you. And they all just kind of move on. And so if like that continues into book 2 and there's no real discussion about that incident, I will be upset.
I could see that. I feel like you're right. There should be something happening, even if it's more conversation. You know, we should see something from that.
I'll be very surprised if we do not meet another Cyanat pair that Ohan talks to get that contrast now of.
Especially when we meet another resistant pair, because we never got to see like an actively resistant Cyanat pair. So like if they run into another, like if they run into another ship, and then at that point, I guess Ohan would have to continue to pretend to be paired if they run into other pairs. Because other species might not think anything of it, but if they see another Cyanat pair, he probably wouldn't want them to know that he's solitary.
Yeah, because he's supposed to go to that, was it a moon or something? Wherever they are. He's supposed to go there like it's expected. He says, I am expected to go there, but he doesn't want to go. So that could be something that comes up in the future where maybe it becomes an issue of some kind that somebody does see him out as a solitary.
So we're all looking for some good Ohan content from the next books is what I'm hearing.
I wanted to bring up AI. I've mentioned in the past that AI is one of my like favorite things. I love artificial intelligence stories. It's fascinating in fiction, and even now, obviously, people are trying to create real artificial intelligence, and so it's an interesting topic that I thought was done very well in this book. The question that seems to come up very often, especially with the ship AI Lovey, is an AI sentient? I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that, on how Chambers wrote this into this book. Do you think that AI should be considered sentient in this context?
I think Lovey comes across very much as sentient, especially when you see the difference between Lovey and Lovelace at the end. But we don't really see anybody else. Like, we see a couple other like snippets of an AI here and there. But Lovey's really the only one that we have any interaction with. And she very much is sentient and feels like she feels herself to be sentient. Like the fact that like they're all gendered, like she refers to herself as a female. She is a female. That's just, who she is. She very much feels sentient. This book has made me very grateful that I always say thank you to Alexa and Siri every time. Every time Alexa does something, I say thank you. I'm like, all right, when they rise up, I will be fine.
I do the same thing.
Yes. It just feels polite.
Be nice to anything that responds to you. Jason, what are your thoughts on the AI and sentience?
I think the way Lovey is presented in this book, she's definitely sentient. There is a emotional maturity to her. I think she is aware that she's an AI, and she was rebooted, and they tell her that you used to be in love with this person. You've lost everything that made you, but now you could in theory grow again. It's very much like you're talking to a person. It didn't seem like it was a artificial intelligence trying to approximate a personality. Lovey was a person. At least the way Chambers wrote her. So I definitely think that the fact that you are aware of what you are plays a big part of acknowledging that you are sentient.
So you're thinking philosophically, the idea of sentience, the whole I think, therefore I am. You're in that vein.
Yeah.
Look, anybody who can make me cry can have sentience. That's anybody who has sentience. Lovey made me cry, so you're sentient and you get rights. That's my bar. You hit me emotionally, you've got it.
I enjoy the philosophical stuff with AI. The what makes something human or sentient. And so I thought it was really interesting in this book. There's a section towards the beginning where we're seeing things from Jenks' perspective, and he's talking about how there's probably dozens of versions of Lovelace flying throughout the galaxy in other people's ships. That's just what it is. She's programmed. She's programmed to be installed in your ship and then become part of your crew that way. But it says here, but they weren't her. The Lovey that Jenks knew was uniquely molded by the Wayfarer. And he talks about her personality has been shaped by every experience she and the crew had together, every place they'd been, every conversation they'd shared. And honestly, Jenks thought, couldn't the same be said for organic people? Weren't they all born running the basic human starter platform, which was shaped and changed as they went along? I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, in that, if an AI is able to learn and adapt and create their own, let's say, personality, and are aware that they are who they are and different from others, that I would say is sentience. That makes them a completely separate person. And I just loved the way that this section was, this part was written to explain that perspective.
It's like taking the nature versus nurture argument and applying it to AI. Like, by nature, you are an AI, you're a computer, you're a program, but by nurture, you're your own personality, your own person. Which one of those outweighs the other? And I want this to be how this goes. So there's a mention when she's quote unquote dying. Devastating section, by the way. My God. As she's dying and Jenks is talking with her, and she talks about how she has a directory with all of the conversations they've ever had. And then I was thinking, they talk about how when they hard reset her, you basically have her programming and then her memory banks, and her memory banks is what's corrupted. And that's, what doesn't, she has to basically decide when she reboots if she gets those memory banks back or she doesn't. And it's not, she comes back as Lovely. So she doesn't. But she specifically mentions that database being like, 5/303. Is that something that's stored in her memory banks, or was that something specifically stored in her OS separately because she said she didn't have those for anybody else? And then now that she's in a body kit, is she going to suddenly access those at some point and be back to the person that Jenks knew? I need this to happen. I need
you and I are on the same wavelength here.
Yes.
That is exactly what I was thinking, because she said it's a completely different named directory. And so when they said, her memory files were wiped, I was like, but where's that one?
Is she gonna find it? Is she gonna find it pretty soon? It's just gonna take her a little while. She's gonna stumble over these files and be like, oh, what's this?
But I am really hoping that, somehow she finds her way back in some capacity to Jenks. Maybe if not just Jenks, at least the crew. Obviously they know she exists. Lovelace exists. So I don't know, maybe we'll see her come back.
I think
I really hope so.
Me too. There's a lot of not a lot. There's quite a few interspecies relationships, and I was totally cool that Ashby and Pei, love them. Rosemary and Sussex, shocking, loved them. But the only thing that made me go ooh, I don't know about this, was Jenks taking off all his clothes and then sitting in the core. I was like, what are we what Joaquin Phoenix, her shit is going down here? That was of everything that happened, that was the most bizarre shit. The taking off your clothes and then sitting in the core and then kissing the metal. What are we doing?
Okay, so when the Rosemary Sussex thing happened, I sent Jason a message and was like, okay, I think we're gonna have some really weird conversations about this book. And then later I was like, oh, maybe not. We're already seeing an interspecies thing happening, so it's not that weird. But then that happened with Jenks, and then I was like, no, we might have some weird topics.
Weird.
It was just I have nothing against having a relationship, him having a relationship with Lovey. That's fine, because we've I believe agreed that she is sentient. She is a person. But it did feel a little weird that he did that.
Immediately, as soon as you had the first interactions way early in the book between him and Lovey, I was joking with myself. I was like, oh, this is getting real her up in here. And then it kept going, and I was like, oh, but it is. Oh, but it is. That is where we're going. Okay. All right.
Jason, you're very quiet.
I'm trying to find my note that I made when there was the first hint that Lovey and Jenks had a thing going on. And I'm like, oh, we're gonna get some artificial intelligence person living. And so the only note I put right when they were talking, I think it was Lovey saying, I like to know what you like. And Jenks said, I like you. And then went on like that. Oh. The note I put was oh, I better get some person AI loving.
Because at that point, what does she have? Are there some mechanical arms somewhere in here? How weird are we gonna get?
Yeah,
here?
I wanted to see that because the thing about sci-fi I love is you can get real weird, and I wanted to see is there some weird haptic chamber that you sit in that
I mean
you plug in is there this weird? You could go anywhere with this, and so I'm like, oh, these people are a couple. Oh, let's get weird with it. I want to see this.
Weird.
And so it didn't get weird enough for me, honestly. Okay, that's not fair. That I didn't quite think it was going to play out with sitting there naked and licking the metal, but that was a little weird. But
I'm thinking of Digital Get Down.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, have you guys? This is a separate interspecies relationship. Have you guys seen The Shape of Water?
Yes, I just saw that.
Okay,
recently.
So when the lady she's asking about she's like, how does it work? And then she makes the hand gesture.
Yeah,
and I was as soon as that, there's a line when they go to visit Sussex's family, and Rosemary sees two of them banging, and she's like, and suddenly all my questions about how the males whatever, like what their genitalia, where it was hidden, was answered. I was like, all I imagined was that scene where she just moves her hand and then like gestures. It's like, oh my God, this is full Shape of Water. This is full Shape of Water in here. And I'm here for it. I hope it wins an Oscar.
You know, I hadn't thought of that scene, but that makes sense.
Like, how many Oscar-winning interspecies relationships do we got going
Not
on
enough.
here? We only have so much to
Not
work
enough.
with. Exactly.
You're right. Maybe we'll start seeing this more often now.
Give us the long way to a Small Angry Planet movie we all deserve.
That would be amazing, actually. I would definitely watch that. We're gonna shift our gears just a little bit. There was an interesting question that we found on Reddit about this book. So I'm just going to read it from here. It says, the idea of faster than light travel is something that comes up pretty regularly in sci-fi. Do you agree with the reasoning behind the ban in this particular universe? There's a paragraph in the book that says, the ban against FTL was one of the oldest laws on the books, predating the founding of the GC. While traveling faster than light was technologically possible, the logistical and social problems caused by what basically amounted to time travel far outweighed the gains. And aside from the administrative nightmare, few people were keen on a method of transportation that guaranteed everyone you knew back home would be long dead by the time you reached your destination. So it was very interesting that they did not include faster than light. Did you guys agree with this reasoning?
Yes. I loved that Chambers actually thought about this. So much sci-fi has faster than light travel. And yeah, the implications are that you would travel a shorter amount of time than anybody else left behind. And so you look at Star Wars, right? And they go through all these freaking hyperspace things and no time passes. Like, you just go from planet to planet and it's no big deal. Like, that's not the way this would work. And so I love when authors actually think about the science and not just explain it, but be like, yo, this honestly would not make a whole lot of sense for a society to function. Like, you couldn't just go to the next planet and come back because 50 years would have passed. So the fact that Chambers said, no, FTL doesn't exist in this universe, it's illegal. I was like, oh my God, yes, thank you.
I felt like it was a really smart way to not have to deal with FTL in your universe. Like, she wrote that sentence, and I thought one of two things. I was like, first of all, this is either going to be some Chekhov's gun thing, where they say early on that it's like an illegal thing and it's banned and nobody ever does it. And then in Act 3, we're actually going to break all the rules and do it. And then when they didn't, I was like, oh, that was a super smart way to get around having to deal with FTL in your universe. Like, you were just like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to worry about it. So it's fucking illegal. Nobody can do it. Boom. Done. Don't have to do it. I was like, that made sense. That was smart. I did not give it quite the credit you did, where it was like, like fully, like all the implications of it. I was just like, I feel like she just didn't want to have to write FTL, and this was a really easy way to do it. Not that that's a bad thing, because I do think there's a good reason to not want to have to write FTL, because there's a lot of stupid implications that come with it that are never thought of.
It definitely makes it more technical too, which is obviously something she didn't really want to have to write in this book. I kept thinking about how FTL was handled in To Sleep in a Sea of Stars.
Me too.
Because that started to confuse the fuck out of me in that book, because they started talking about, like, I can't remember the term, but being able to see into the future because of FTL and all this stuff. And then it got like super technical around that. And I was like, I don't understand what's going on anymore. So I do like the reasoning and how quickly and easily FTL was just written out. Didn't have to hear about it, read about it ever again after that.
I will be very surprised if it does not come back in the series, because the fact that it's illegal does not mean that it doesn't exist.
Yeah, like that would be
True.
an easier way to say it. Like, if it wasn't going to come up at all for any reason, she would have just said they never figured it out. Like, after everything, we figured out space travel, we figured out all this, and somehow nobody broke that. But the fact that she wrote that it is possible, it is in there, and it's just that it's illegal, it's got to be a Chekhov's gun thing where it's going to come back at some point as like a big thing that they're going to have to like have a whole plot point about, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this?
Maybe she needed more time to research it.
Maybe. Because like you said, Into Sleep, like it's a huge complicated thing. And like I want to say specifically thanks one or two like physicists that he was constantly consulting with on the book. Because he was like, I don't understand half of this shit. So I had to make sure that it sort of theoretically made sense.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I think Becky Chambers made a good decision on leaving it out, at least for this first novel.
I think that's part of the many things that I think go back to like making this a really good starter sci-fi.
It's not too heavy in the actual science-y part. Yeah, no, it's a good
It has
point.
enough of it. Like I said, like I've read enough hard sci-fi that gets real into the weeds with this stuff, and sometimes it's like, ooh, over my head, I don't get it all. But this had enough that it touched upon it. Like the author was very clear. It's like, I understand this. I'm not going to go into it, but like for you hardcore sci-fi nerds, I get it. And I think the author's background, I think I read her bio, her background, her family's background is in space science. Like they grew up with it. She grew up with it. So she knows her stuff, but she made it accessible. Like you said, about like anybody can pick this up and go with it.
Well, I think we went over a lot of stuff. Obviously there's a lot more we could talk about. But we did cover a lot. Obviously, we all liked it, but I want to know what each of you would rate this book, and will you be reading the rest of the series? Emma.
Oh, I get to go first.
You get to go first.
I hate rating things, but I always do because Goodreads is a tyrant and makes us all think that we have to. So I think I gave this a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. The way that I rate things, I think it's super subjective for a lot of people. So my ratings on Goodreads always just come down to how much I enjoyed the book. So it's not even necessarily about like, is it the best written book I've ever read? Is it like the worst written book I've ever read? Is it grammatically? It's always just how much I enjoyed it. And then, so if I really enjoyed something like this, it'd be a 4-star. And then it really takes something like really, really hitting me to make it a 5. Like Addie was a 5. Like, there's a bunch on there, but like it really takes something crazy to do that. So I think I gave this a 4. It might even be like a 4.5 out of 5, just because I really, really enjoyed it. It was a really good time, and I have to read the rest of them. I have to. So I'm gonna read the other 3 main books. I'm kind of iffy on novellas. Like it'll depend on what the novella's about. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of like, take them or leave them most of the time. But I think I definitely will end up reading the 3 main other books in the series.
Nice. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Me too.
Me too.
What about you, Jason?
I pretty much the same. I gave it a 4 out of 5. My scale is very similar. A 5 is basically, I love this book. I couldn't put it down. Like it just hit me and left me wanting more. A 4 is, I like this book. It was a really good book. There's nothing really bad with it. It just didn't reach that extra level, and so I gave it a 4 out of 5. And I'm definitely going to be reading the rest of the series for sure.
I am also giving it a 4 out of 5. I did really enjoy it. I think that I went into it expecting a little more action.
Same.
So I'm hoping to get a little bit more in the following books. But I did really enjoy it because I am a very huge fan of Firefly. And just kind of that crew family space adventure kind of thing. So I did very much enjoy it, and I will be reading the rest of the series after I read a couple of other books first. So we all rated it 4. It looks like on Goodreads it has an average of 4.15. So kind of online on the same wavelength as everybody else who's rated it. Most people, and that's out of a lot of people. Over 86,000, almost 87,000 ratings. That's a lot.
Not bad for a Kickstarter.
He says came out in 2014.
Yes, 2014.
Nice.
So I would say I recommend this book to other people just based on ratings. Who would you say we would recommend this to? I would say probably people who enjoy the personal character driven stories. Specifically in sci-fi, since that is a very rare thing to find.
Yeah, I think that covers it. I think anybody who enjoys character driven, I think that's a big caveat to probably give when you're recommending this book to people, is that it's much more character driven than plot driven, because that is a turnoff for some people. Obviously, all of us enjoyed it a lot, but I know that some people will be like weird about that. So I think anybody who really likes character driven, the whole space opera genre, and then anybody who likes sci-fi, but even because it's so accessible, anybody who wants to just get into sci-fi.
Did we cover that, Jason?
That was it. And if you want to see some interspecies relationships.
Oh yeah. If you like interspecies
If that's your
relationships,
thing, then hey,
you might like this. Well, I mentioned this is very much like sci-fi. This is very much like Firefly. So if you liked this book, I recommend also reading or even watching anything Firefly / Serenity, because it's very much like this, just without aliens. I would also recommend
Wait, Firefly doesn't have aliens?
No.
Well, then why the fuck is it a space show?
It's a space
there
western.
Are no aliens.
It's a space western.
Yeah, boring. Next.
No, I hate it.
Yeah,
no,
I hate it.
No.
What's even the point?
No.
Why are you in space if there are no aliens?
Watch it and read it.
No aliens, my ass.
I don't know. Maybe we would have gotten them.
Species, what is the point?
Wow. All I know is if they would have had an alien, they would have got a second season.
Maybe we would have got aliens if it got a second season.
Chicken or the egg?
I wanted to say, well, actually, we've mentioned it already, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. I would also recommend that if you like sci-fi, misfit crew kind of thing. To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. It's also a first contact space adventure, which is pretty cool.
But probably with the caveat that book is way more technical.
It is
way more hard sci-fi. That's whenever I recommend it to people, I always that's the number one thing. I'm like, this is really good. It's really amazing. It's very heavy in the technical aspects. So if you like that, if you're super into that, then you're going to love it.
It's also a little long, but it's a really great story.
It is the second longest book on my shelf.
Are there aliens?
Yes.
I'm in.
Perfect. And there is technically interspecies coupling, depending on your definition of coupling.
Kind of.
If you stretch that definition, they are technically coupled.
Good point. I also wanted to recommend, it's a newer I don't know if it's going to be a trilogy. I know it's a duology so far. The Last Watch by J.S. Duess. I just read that. It's kind of like a misfit military crew that is trying to save the universe from basically collapsing on itself. And then the second book is The Exiled Fleet, which is coming out later this year, 2021. Did you guys have any recommendations for something similar?
Yeah, the two books came to mind right away. The first one's actually a series. It's called The Long Earth series by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. The premise of the series is that the discovery of parallel Earths is made. People are able to travel to parallel Earths. It's a very character-driven, science, sociology-driven story. So it's not very action-heavy. So it's very similar to this one, where there's not a whole lot of action to it. It just follows people on their journeys and discovers the science and the implications of all that. It's very, very good. I think there's about 4 or 5 books to that. And then the other one that I really, really recommend is, and this goes back to the FTL discussion we had, is Tau Zero by
Hole Anderson.
it's about a spacecraft that's already traveling close to the speed of light, and then the ship's deceleration system is damaged, so they can't slow down, and they can only keep going faster and faster until eventually they hit the speed of light. And it deals with what that is like, because now time has gone away from them outside of the ship. So it really deals with that kind of like the difference in time between the ship time and space time. It's very hard science. It's very quick read, but it's kind of a heavy read. But I highly recommend it.
That sounds really interesting. I might have to add that to my list.
You should.
Emma's over there like, I don't know.
No, it sounds. I was thinking. I was like, I don't really have a lot of recommendations that are like this because I don't read a lot of sci-fi. So my only sci-fi recommendations tend to be To Sleep in a Sea of Stars and more recently Lunar Chronicles. Those are like the only sci-fi books that I have on my shelf right now. I'm working on it.
That's okay. That's okay. We got you to read this, so maybe we'll find something else you like.
If anybody knows about elves and dwarves in space, hit me up. Oh, also Winter's Orbit. If you're looking for character-driven sci-fi that's more about the characters than it is about the sci-fi, Winter's Orbit is a really amazing queer sci-fi romance that I love.
I'm actually just about to buy that.
It's so good. It's right there behind my Porg on my shelf. Which is a great image for the audio podcast that cannot see what I'm pointing to.
Well, that's cool. I hadn't thought of that one. But I'm excited then because I'll be reading that soon.
It's so good. I love it so much.
Okay, well, if that is the last of our recommendations, I guess we'll call this then. Emma, we're thankful that you were able to join us for this episode.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I feel so included.
Where would you like people to find you?
Oh, so I tend to be most active on Twitch. You can find me at twitch.tv/EmmaSkies, where I play a lot more sci-fi than I read. So you can find me there. I tend to be live Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find me on Instagram at EmmaSkies. At what point do I stop saying I'm a cosplayer? Because I have not made anything in a year. COVID did a number on my creative motivation.
Everybody took a break from cosplay for a year. So, I mean, you can still say you're a cosplayer.
Well, you can find my quote-unquote cosplay at EmmaSkies on Instagram. I have a secondary Instagram at BiblioSkies, which is where I talk about books, and Twitter at EmmaSkies.
Woohoo! All right. And as always, if you want to join the discussion for this book or any other book that we've read, you can do so on our social media, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, by searching Shit We've Read. And then, if anybody wants to find me and Jason, you can check out our website at shitweread.com. Well, I think that's it. Jason, did you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to say thanks again to Emma for joining us. It was a lot of fun having you here and having you discuss this book. Thanks for your insights and your opinions. And
I always have a lot of those.
Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully you join us again sometime. And if you do, you can pick the book.
Okay. Yeah. Special episode.
Look, you do not want me picking a book because I've just discovered that bully romance is a genre, and I cannot stop looking these up. I almost refuse to read them, but I can't stop looking them up, and I swear to God, I will make somebody read it.
Look, we're a fantasy sci-fi show. If you could find a fantasy or sci-fi version,
oh God,
I guess so we can't say no.
No.
We'll discuss it.
Shit we read after dark.
And I am suddenly never going to be invited back.
All right. Well, thanks again, Emma, and thanks, Jason. We're gonna close up here, and we'll see everybody next month.
Bye.
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 This episode of Shit We've Read has been an Oblivion Geeks production, hosted by Laura Benson and Jason Rico, with music by Joshua Chilton.
To join the discussion on this and all other books we've read, find us at Shit We've Read on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
For episode transcripts and more information about us, please visit shitwe'veread.com.
This podcast is part of the Bilo Network. Visit bilonetwork.com for more great geeky podcasts.
Thanks so much for listening.